Hello trainers, and welcome to the wonderful world of Pokemon. My name is Professor Matt, so grab your town map and your running shoes, because this is a tutorial, a VGC tutorial. The VGC Tutorials is a series of discussion and guide videos for anyone looking to learn or improve at VGC. Today's episode, however, is specifically for new players to introduce you to the basics of competitive play. If you're already a competitive player looking to learn more about VGC, it's fine to skip this episode. Next episode will be about the basics of double battling, and the one after that is about team building. If you are going to skip this episode, be sure to subscribe before you leave so you get notified when the new videos are coming out. For those of you still with us, welcome to Competitive Pokemon. This is going to be quite a different world of Pokemon than what you're used to, but it's a great community and it makes the game much more enjoyable, especially as you get older. Not that I actually believe there's such a thing as being too old for Pokemon, but if your interests are starting to wane, this is a great way to make the game refreshing and enjoyable for the years to come. So to start off, let's talk about competitive formats. Formats are the rule set that trainers use when battling to ensure that the battle is fair, balanced, and fun. There are a lot of different formats for whatever game type you're interested in playing, but for the most part they come in two types, official and fan-made. Fan-made formats are run by an organization called Smogon. This is a group of fans that has taken it upon themselves to balance and regulate the singles metagame through a system of tiers and bans. These tiers limit what Pokemon can be used so that you can play with Pokemon you enjoy without having to face the more overpowered Pokemon. This was a necessity for competitive singles play, because it is inherently much less balanced than doubles. In singles, every Pokemon needs clearer strengths and weaknesses, so that the push and pull gameplay of forcing switches and predicting plays can occur. However, it is much too easy for powerful Pokemon to dominate in singles, because their strengths can overcome their weaknesses. These Pokemon need to be banned so that regular play can occur. This really doesn't happen in doubles. Pokemon that are normally too fast or too strong for singles are perfectly fine in doubles because you have two Pokemon to handle any given situation, which makes it a lot easier to find your way out of a bad position. Because of this, the official formats are primarily doubles. VGC is the main official format, and it is the format this series will be focusing on. VGC stands for Video Game Championships, and is the format used for all official tournaments, including the World Championship. The rule set for VGC changes slightly each year to keep things interesting, but there are a few things that stay the same every year. First off, it's always a double battle format, where both trainers have a team of 6 Pokemon, but they choose 4 to bring to battle. Secondly, a trainer's team cannot have 2 Pokemon of the same species, including Pokemon with alternate forms. They also cannot have 2 Pokemon holding the same item. And finally, the ban list changes slightly each year, but in general, mythical Pokemon will always be banned, and cover or uber legendaries will always be banned or restricted. For those of you that don't know, legendaries are actually broken into 3 different types. The first is known as cover or uber legendaries. These are the Pokemon usually found on the box art of their respective games. Lugia and Ho-Oh, Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza, Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, and so on. As I just mentioned, these Pokemon are usually banned. This is because of the overwhelming power that these Pokemon can have. However, there have been a few special years where they actually make these Pokemon restricted instead of banned, meaning you can use them, but you are limited to only having a certain number of them on your team. Mythical Pokemon are the second type. These are the Pokemon not available through normal gameplay. You might have to go to GameStop or some other store to download or receive a code for them. Pokemon like Darkrai, Celebi, Jirachi, and Arceus. These Pokemon can sometimes be extremely powerful, but the reason that they're banned is only because not everyone has access to them. Most of these Pokemon require you to travel to a store or receive a code for them, and you need internet connection to download them, and all of them are only available for a limited amount of time. Because of this, it's fair to everyone if these Pokemon just remain collector's items. The third and final type of legendary Pokemon is called a sub-legend, also sometimes referred to as a trio legend because they usually come in threes. These are the Pokemon that usually play a minor role in the plot of their respective games, but aren't the main focus. Examples would be Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres, Entei, Raikou, and Suicune, and so on. Sub-legends really only receive the title of legendary because of the role that they play in the plot of their game. Their stats, moves, and competitive viability are all about average compared to other competitive Pokemon. Because of this, most people see no reason to restrict the use of sub-legends in competitive formats, including in VGC. Now that you know the basics of formats, I'm sure you're wondering how you get ready to play. Well, a lot goes into being ready for competitive Pokemon, and that's the main reason why it isn't as popular as other competitive games. This part can scare away a lot of new players because it can take a lot of work just to be ready to practice the game. What I'm talking about is EV training and IV breeding. To understand this topic, first you'll need to understand how stats in Pokemon actually work, because the game itself does a very poor job of explaining it. There are actually 4 parts to determine what a Pokemon's stat will be. The first part of a Pokemon's stat is its base stats. These are unique and specific values for each species of Pokemon. The other 3 parts of a Pokemon's stat apply the same bonuses to all Pokemon, so base stats are the main way to determine what is a viable Pokemon and what isn't. Take for example, Garchomp, Flygon, and Quagsire. All 3 of these Pokemon are physical ground types, so they're all trying to fill the same role on your team. But if you'll notice, Garchomp's base stats are so much higher than the other 2, there's very little reason you'll ever use them. They do have niche roles they can fill, so it's not impossible to use the other 2, but 99% of the time, Garchomp will be the best choice. As I mentioned, base stats are specific to each species of Pokemon, so all Garchomps have the exact same base stat distribution, and so on with every species of Pokemon. Trainer Tower has put together a list of all of Pokemon legal in VGC 2017 in order of their base stat total, so I'll put a link in the description if you'd like to use that while team building. Keep in mind, base stats are not the only thing that determines a Pokemon's viability. You also have to consider the Pokemon's type, move pool, and ability. Slaking is a great example of this. It has one of the highest base stat totals of any Pokemon, but because its ability hinders it so greatly, it sees very little play and is actually considered a very poor choice for any team. The second part of a Pokemon's stat is the effort values, or EVs for short. This is the result of training Pokemon, and it is the reason why Pokemon raised by a trainer are almost always stronger than a Pokemon of the same level in the wild. EVs are a number system, where Pokemon can have a maximum of 510 EVs in total, but each stat can only have a maximum of 252. At level 100, for every 4 EVs a Pokemon has in a stat, that stat will be boosted by 1 point. Because 510 isn't divisible by 4, only 508 of the total 510 EVs are actually usable. You can give your Pokemon EVs by knocking out other Pokemon. Each Pokemon has a certain value of EVs that it yields to each Pokemon that participated in the battle, including through EXP share. Because EVs are a finite resource and not something that can just be maxed out, trainers have to decide how to distribute them on Pokemon. This is commonly referred to as a Pokemon's spread. The main source of variation between competitive Pokemon is their spreads, and in a future video, I will teach you how to determine what EVs to use thanks to some great online tools that are available. The third and most complex part of a Pokemon's stats is their individual values, or IVs for short. These are values that are randomly assigned to each of a Pokemon's stats when they're caught, hatched, or received from an NPC. These values range from 0 to 31, with 31 being considered perfect. A Pokemon's IVs cannot be changed once they're caught, hatched, or received, except through hyper training. The main way for getting perfect Pokemon, however, is through breeding. When Pokemon breed, they can actually pass their own IVs to their offspring, similar to how genetics work in the real world. There's a bit more to explain with IV breeding, but plenty of other YouTubers have covered this topic in great detail, so I'll put some links in the description if you're interested in learning more about this topic. Competitive players will always have Pokemon with perfect IVs in every stat except the ones that they don't use, because it's just a number that needs to be maxed out, not a resource like EVs. The fourth and final aspect of Pokemon stats is their nature. Nature is actually a modifier that boosts one stat by 10% and hinders another by 10%. Most Pokemon only attack with either physical or special moves, not both. So when selecting a nature, it's usually best to just make it hinder the attacking stat that isn't used. Like IVs, natures cannot be changed once you have caught, hatched, or received a Pokemon, so breeding is used to control it. When two Pokemon breed, if one of them is holding an Everstone, that Pokemon's nature will be passed to its offspring. If no parent is holding an Everstone, the offspring's nature will be randomly generated. I'll cover natures a little bit more in depth in a future video where I help you build EV spreads because it comes into play a little bit more there. But for now, I'll put a link in the description to the chart of natures that explains what each one boosts and hinders. Let's look at an example to really wrap things up. Here are the stats of 3 different Garchomp that someone might have. The first one is a standard competitive Garchomp. The second one is a custom competitive Garchomp. And the third one is a casual player's Garchomp. First off, you can see all 3 of them have exactly the same base stats. This is because they're all the same species of Pokemon. These values are set in stone and cannot be changed except by using a completely different Pokemon. Secondly, we have the IVs. The 2 competitive Garchomps have 31 IVs in every stat because they're bred for it, but the third one has its IVs randomized because it was caught in the wild. The third column is the EVs. As I mentioned before, this is the main variation between competitive Pokemon. The first one is using a standard set, with its attack and speed maxed out and the remainder put in special defense. The second Garchomp has a little bit of its EVs taken out of its speed and attack to be given to its HP. This, combined with its item of Assault Vest, makes it a much bulkier variant than the standard one, being only a little bit slower and having a little less attack. Finally, the casual player's Garchomp has EVs assigned at random. This is because if you play through the main story of the game, you battle all sorts of other Pokemon without paying attention to how that affects your EVs. Also, the 2 competitive Garchomps have a Jolly nature, which boosts your speed and lowers special attacks since that's the attacking stat they don't use. The casual player's Garchomp has its nature assigned at random again, so it got one of the 5 neutral natures. Now let's look at what this means for their actual stats. The standard Garchomp has slightly less bulk than the others, but it's the fastest and has the highest attack by a large margin. The custom competitive Garchomp has the best balance of bulk, speed, and attack. The casual player's Garchomp happens to have the same bulk as the custom one by random chance, but its attack and speed are abysmal compared to the other 2. It's alright if you don't understand all of this right away. The more you work with these mechanics and the more you're exposed to them, the easier it'll be to understand them. But once you have a complete understanding of how to optimize your Pokemon's stats, that is what most people consider to be the barrier of entry to competitive play. Understanding and utilizing this knowledge means you are officially a competitive player. The trick then is just learning how to pick which Pokemon to use on your team and how to battle with them, both of which I'll be covering in future episodes. If that interests you, or if you're interested in seeing other VGC related discussion and guide videos, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you know when I post my next videos. Also, if you found this video helpful, leave a like to let me know you guys are enjoying this. Finally, leave a comment if you have any questions on today's video, or if you have any suggestions on topics you'd like to see in a future episode. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the VGC Tutorial. Best of luck to you all.